31-0. Clemson fans want to hold on to that number. Ohio State fans want to forget that a long, long time ago. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the matchup that everyone wants to see. Clemson, number 3 in the college football playoff rankings, at Ohio State at number 2. So they switched jerseys this time around, as the Buckeyes were number 3 in the away whites against Clemson's home orange. So expect the scarlet and gray to be going scarlet on top, and then the Clemson Tigers to be wearing the road whites. The road whites is what they wore when they won the national championship game against Alabama last year. Of course, no number 1 seed has won a national championship game in 5 years of the playoff. All right, that's 31-0 from 2016. Maybe in a future video, we'll look at what players are still on the roster that actually saw the field in 2016 in that college football playoff game, because obviously most of the personnel will be different in this matchup. We're here to look at the numbers. If you want to check out our Oklahoma-LSU matchup, please do. This is Ohio State and Clemson by the numbers. At least with the Sooners and the Tigers, we had a common opponent in Texas that was interesting to break down. Ohio State and Clemson, no such situation here, but let's run it down. Ohio State's got the number 1 offense in the nation in regards to points per game at 48.7. Look at this. Clemson has the number 1 scoring defense at 10.6 points per game. Something's got to give, of course. Most likely, we're going to fall somewhere between 48.7 and 10.6 when the two teams get together and the Buckeyes are on offense. Ohio State has the number 41 passing game in the nation. And again, this is just total yards. So do the Buckeyes have a better passing attack than 41st in the country? Absolutely. They have one of the 5 to 10 best passing attacks in the country, but just in looking at total yards, 259 per game, that's number 41 in the nation. Justin Fields has thrown 1 interception. Clemson has intercepted the ball 17 times. Again, something has to give. Either the Tigers will force him into a few turnovers, or Justin Fields will stay very clean in regards to his decision-making downfield. All right, again, the Buckeyes had 259 yards passing per game. Clemson is number 1 in pass defense at 139 yards given up per game. Ohio State rushes the ball extremely well. During the course of the season, they took on a Wisconsin defense that is one of the very best against the ground game. They chewed them up. Penn State, they made yardage. Penn State, exceptional. Top 5 in the nation. Rush defense. Michigan State, when they showed up, was number 1 in the nation. And Ohio State chewed them up. So, got to consider here, and we will outline these statistics a little bit better later in the video in regards to the context of the stats, because Ohio State faced excellent rush defenses. So for the Buckeyes to be number 5 in the nation in rushing offense is incredible, especially considering, obviously, the service academies hold those top spots all the time because they run the football 95% of the time. 272 yards on the ground for the Buckeyes per game. Clemson is number 9 in the nation in giving up just 106 per game on the ground. Ohio State, yards per play. We talked about this in the previous video. It's very important and indicates the strength of a football team that imposes its will and is skilled and athletic and is able to pick up yards per play, because the tempo of the game determines how many plays you run and how quickly you score. This shows dominance or lack thereof. Ohio State is number 5 in the nation in yards per play at 6.8. Clemson is the number 1 defense in the country in yards per play, tied with somebody else. We'll get to that in just a second. Clemson, number 1 in the nation in yards per play, given up 3.7. The Ohio State third down efficiency, best in the nation. In playing Wisconsin twice, Michigan State, Penn State, still number 1 in the nation in converting third downs at 57%. Now, let's keep in mind that a byproduct of that is most likely converting shorter third downs. Regardless of how explosive, how efficient the offense is, they're going to convert more likely third and short than third and 16. So the Buckeyes have put themselves in a great place on third down, and then they convert, number 1 in the nation. Clemson is top 10 in the nation in not giving up third down conversions at just 30.6%, number 10 in the nation. Ohio State's offensive efficiency is remarkable, number 2 in the nation at 95.9. Clemson's defensive efficiency even more remarkable, number 1 in the nation. The special teams, and we saw this play out with Oklahoma and LSU. We did not dive into the special teams just to give you the efficiency number, and not good for the Sooners and the Tigers, not good for the Buckeyes and the Clemson Tigers. This has historically, in recent times, been an issue with Clemson special teams. Ohio State has excelled on special teams under Urban Meyer. So I think this is a combination of special teams not being quite as important until you make a mistake, that these teams are so good that they can give up the yardage differential on a punt exchange or a kickoff exchange. Now, when you talk about turnovers in the kicking game, that's huge, or missing field goals, huge. But I also think that the metric probably needs to be tweaked. Ohio State number 62 in special teams, Clemson number 120. All right, when Clemson has the ball, they score 46.5 points per game. That's number 4 in the nation. The Buckeyes, though, give up only 10.5 points per game, number 3 in the country. Clemson passes it well, 295 per game. That's number 20 in the nation. Consider all the blowouts where they do continue to pass the ball, but obviously not as aggressively and not at the frequency that they would if they were playing closer games. So that's even more impressive. And the Buckeyes are number 2 in the nation to Clemson in pass defense, giving up just 148 per game through the air. Clemson, the 10th best rushing team in the nation, according to the stats. They're actually better than that, just like Ohio State's better than number 5 in the nation in rushing. But statistically, the hard stats say number 10 for Clemson, 253 per game on the ground. Ohio State gives up just 99.5, a tick less than 100 yards per game rushing, and that's playing Jonathan Taylor twice, number 7 in the country. Clemson, yards per play on offense, 7.2. That's number 4 in the nation. Ohio State is tied with Clemson. The Ohio State defense gives up just 3.7 yards per play. That's number 1 in the country. Clemson, number 12 in the nation in third down efficiency at 47.3. I should say third down conversion. The Buckeyes are number 4 in the nation, giving up just 28.6% conversions on third down. Clemson's offensive efficiency is number 5 in the nation. Ohio State's defensive efficiency, number 2 in the nation. These two teams are loaded. That's all there is to it. All right, let's consider the schedule. The Buckeyes have had a more difficult schedule. Wisconsin twice, Michigan, Penn State. Clemson's best wins would be Texas A&M, Virginia, and Wake. Now, what did Clemson and Ohio State do against its best opponents, the toughest opponents on the schedule? Well, I think it proves out that these are the 2 most dominant teams in the country on both sides of the ball. LSU on offense, yes, but not necessarily on defense. Oklahoma was tested by a number of teams that are decent teams on the schedule, like TCU, Iowa State, Kansas State, whom they lost to. So Oklahoma not nearly as dominant. These are the 2 most dominant teams in the country. Look at these numbers against the best teams on the schedule. Clemson defensively, so this is defense. Clemson faced Wake Forest, the number 12 offense in the country, at 473 yards per game. Clemson held them to 105. Sage Surratt, the best wide receiver for the Wake Forest team, out for that game, but still 105 yards and 3 points for Wake Forest. 370-some yards below their average. Gave up 5 first downs. Against North Carolina, the number 14 offense in the nation at 469 yards per game. North Carolina at 290 in yardage, 20 points. So they were held to about 180 yards less than their average. Louisville, 442 yards per game, number 36 in the nation in offense. Clemson held them to 263 yards and just 10 points. That's about 160 yards, 180 yards below their average. Florida State, number 64 yardage offense at 403 per game, held to 253 by Clemson, about 150 yards below their average, and they only scored 14 points. And most of the points scored in these games, garbage points. For Florida State, garbage points. Louisville, garbage points. Although that game was close in the first half, Louisville did score and stay in that game legitimately. North Carolina obviously is the outlier, going down to a 2-point conversion with 1 minute left to play. Texas A&M. Texas A&M was not nearly as good as we expected them to be. They only finished the regular season with the 70th rated offense in the nation in total yardage at 399 yards per game. Clemson held them to 100 yards less, about 110 at 289 and 10 points, and even the touchdown scored by the Aggies. Garbage time, 2 seconds left. How about the Clemson offense? Clemson faced statistically better offenses than Ohio State, but Ohio State by far faced the better defenses. Clemson offensively faced the number 31 defense in Texas A&M at 341 yards per game, and Clemson only put up 389 yards and 24 points. Very conservative game plan, and Texas A&M, obviously the most talented team. They are the most talented team that Clemson faced this year. So Clemson only gained about 50 yards more on Texas A&M than the Aggies typically give up and scored just the 24 points. Against Virginia in this ACC championship game, the Cavaliers had a nice season, good defense, 41st in the nation, giving up 358 yards per game. They gave up 619 yards to Clemson and those 62 points. So they gave up 260 yards more in that game than Virginia's used to giving up on average. And then North Carolina, defensively, number 60 in the nation. So Clemson only faced 3 of the top 60 defenses in the country. North Carolina was number 60 at 382 yards per game. Clemson actually underachieved against North Carolina. Again, this is the outlier. North Carolina, against a fairly weak schedule, marginal schedule, gave up just 389 yards per game, and Clemson only rang up 331 yards against North Carolina in that 21-20 win. Let's look at the Ohio State offensive dominance here against Michigan, one of the best defenses in the country, number 6 in the nation in defense at 293 yards per game. Ohio State put up 56 points and 577 yards. That's almost 300 more yards than Michigan gives up. Against Wisconsin in 2 games, Ohio State offensively scored 38 and 34 points. They totaled 431 and 492 yards, and Wisconsin gives up less than 300 yards per game. So Ohio State put up about 150 more and about 200 more on a excellent Wisconsin defense. Against Michigan State, the number 18 defense in the country, giving up 319 yards per game. The Buckeyes hit them up for 529, more than 200 yards more than the average, and 34 points. Penn State, a top 23 defense at 330 yards per game. Buckeyes 417, 28 points. Northwestern, despite all their issues and finishing at 3-9, excellent defense, number 25 in the nation. Give up just 336 yards per game. The Buckeyes hit them up for 480, about 150 yards more, and 52 points. And then finally, Indiana, the top 37 defense in the nation at 350 yards per game. Ohio State hit them up for 520 and 51 points. So Ohio State faced the top 37 defenses in the nation 7 times. 7 games against the top 37 defenses and still came up with the number 1 scoring offense. Clemson only faced the top 3 out of 60 defenses. Ohio State defensively, dominant just like Clemson. Indiana, the 31st ranked offense at 444 yards per game. The Buckeyes gave up just 257 and 10 points. Wisconsin, 442 yards per game. That's good for 37th in the nation. In their first meeting in Columbus, could not get to 200 yards, 191 and 7 points. In the second game, most of the damage done in the first half as Wisconsin found leaks in the Ohio State defense. 432 yards for Wisconsin, but again, only about 35 of those in the second half and 21 points. Nebraska rings up 416 yards per game. That's number 57 in the nation. The Buckeyes held them to 231 and just 1 touchdown, 7 points. Penn State averages 402 yards per game, and the Buckeyes held them about 180 yards less than that at 227 and 17 points. And Michigan, The number 68 offense in the country, that surprised me, that Michigan was not higher than number 68 in the nation in offense and total yards, but of course really ramped that up down the stretch. But 402 yards per game, and the Buckeyes actually just held them right around their average, and of course 27 points. That's the lowdown on Clemson and Ohio State. Basically, the outlier for Clemson is North Carolina. They dominated a pretty weak schedule, especially defensively. And Ohio State faced much better defenses and dominated them, aside from the Wisconsin championship game, in which all of that damage was done in the first half, and then the Buckeyes clamped down in the second half, and Ohio State dominated offensively against defenses, again, 7 games against defenses ranked in the top 37 in the nation. Ohio State Clemson, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be a great game. I would expect it to be no less. The last time, of course, Clemson dominated 31-0, but this Ohio State offense is much, much better than the 2016 version. We will continue to preview the playoffs and all the bowl games right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe.